Hey everybody, welcome to Passion and Purpose Podcast again today. Here's three of my buddies, J.O., you know, affectionately. Cameron Doolittle's with us today, and we just jokingly said it's three guys talking about money. So I know that this applies to everybody listening. So, hey, I wanted to just jump out a little bit, talk about a bit of my own journey, and then Cameron, you're our guest, and J.O. will be colored commentary today. So, you know, when I first started reading the Gospels with fresh eyes, like, hey, I want to live like Jesus, walk like Jesus, learn from Jesus, I was shocked about all the passages so early on about money. And that in Matthew 5, it says, if anybody asks to borrow anything, give it to him without expecting anything in return. If anybody asks for anything, give it. And I was like, whoa, I have never done that in my life. If I let somebody borrow something, I knew what I let them borrow and I was expecting it back. But that started opening my eyes. Then I get to Matthew 6, and it's where your treasure is, there your heart is. And man, all these bigger deals. Don't worry about anything. You know, what you eat, what you're going to drink, what you're going to wear. Trust God for everything. So it just radicalized my life. And what I was really pursuing by reading through the Gospels, I want to know Jesus. I want to know his mission for my life. I want to know his plan for my life. I want to be a contributor. But if I don't deal with this money thing, then none of that stuff is actually going to happen, right? So for our little family and then the community we've had the privilege of leading, the Antioch movement or Antioch Waco here, we've kind of put some clarity around that to say this. As we look through the New Testament, well, really the whole Bible, we see three constructs. One is live simply, basically live within your means. Work diligently. Everybody's called to work faithfully, diligently. And then give generously. Those three buckets have kind of helped us and guided us through the years. And man, I'm just blown away as the years go on how much God uses money both as a revealer of the heart, but also as an expression of the heart for us. So that's my little sermonette.
Yeah.
Talk to us, man. Tell us your biblical worldview, background, that kind of thing.
Yeah, when Jesus talks about where your treasure is, your heart is,
yeah,
he's putting those two right together. We know that he's after our hearts.
Yep.
And then we go, oh, wow, he's after our resources as well. What's that about? And so as we got to talk about in the message last week, when John the Baptist is baptizing all these people, they repent. They want, okay, what do I do? They're asking, what do I do? Where do I start my discipleship? And John the Baptist goes in this really interesting direction. He's like, hey, you guys, if you have two shirts, share with the one that doesn't have one.
Yeah.
And you guys, if you're taking more money than you're supposed to, you need to live with financial integrity. And then you guys, I think it's the soldiers, be content with your wages. And so there you go. Right from the get-go, you've got three different groups, and everything that John the Baptist says has something to do with the way that money affects our hearts and our lives. Because where our treasure is, that's where our heart is.
So I thought that was very profound, by the way. Cameron spoke last week, again, for reference at Antioch Waco. You can get that on YouTube. But that clarity about John the Baptist, immediately when they're asking about the kingdom, it's all about here's your issue, here's your issue, here's your issue related to possessions or money. If you don't deal with those rightly, then you're not going to find the kingdom.
That's right. It feeds right into what you're saying, Jimmy, about live simply. Well, that's to be content.
Yeah.
Right? Be content with your wages. You got to live a simple life.
Yeah.
Work diligently. Okay, don't live with financial integrity. Don't take someone else's money. Right. And then give generously. Right.
Yeah.
So take the two shirts.
So Cameron, as it is, and then J.O. weigh in on this one. You know, every our worldview, our biblical worldview, also has the context of our own lives that we've lived. Yeah. So take us back a little bit for you and money, your relationship with money, growing up as a kid, kind of into your work life, etc. And why is this such an important issue for you?
Yeah, I think as a little kid, I mean, we didn't have a lot. My dad had been a pastor, and then he was in construction, and then there was a recession, and so he was working hard and doing what he could. But at some point, things just don't break your way. And I remember when people from church brought groceries to our house on Thanksgiving, and I thought, oh no, I just felt this sense of shame. We're the ones that are in need. And I remember I think lunch cost 85 cents at school, but mom gave me 44, and I didn't know what money was, right? So I handed in the money. They said, well, this isn't enough. And I was like, well, that's all I have. And I remember them calling down to the office in front of everybody and say, oh, Cameron's on free and reduced lunch. Now it turns out many of my colleagues were on, on free and reduced lunch. But for me in that moment, it felt just, I'm the one that's without.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure what to do with that. But I was told that if you work hard in school, then you can get enough of a job that maybe you can start to change that kind of situation. And so that became an unhealthy motivator for me of achievement and performance.
Right. Yeah. So you found yourself then professionally doing well. So you got to a place where you were making more than enough. So how did your biblical worldview, going from a sense of a poverty mentality, not going to do that, you fight your way out, you get to an abundance. So what'd you do?
Yeah, it's interesting. I did my undergraduate thesis on progressive ambition in politicians. So if we run isn't that great?
That's hilarious.
So if we run you for city council, you'll think, oh, this is great. I'm a city councilman.
Yeah.
And then really quickly, someone's going to say, well, Jimmy, you should be mayor. You say, well, yeah, I should be mayor. And then quickly
you should be congressman.
You go all the way up, right? Yeah. And so everyone is thinking about, unless they're very disciplined within themselves, they're thinking about not how do they steward what they have, but how do they get the thing that they don't have.
Yes.
Right?
Wow.
And so Carolyn and I got to the point in life that we were making more and we were progressing. Right. And then very quickly, amounts that seemed like a lot would then seem, well, yeah, actually I'm probably worth about that amount, right? And then I can't believe they only pay me that. And objectively, it's the same amount.
Yes.
Right? You're making the same amount, but you went from, oh, that's a lot to that's not enough. And we thought, wow, I wonder if that progressive ambition that we saw in politicians is happening to us with money. Mm-hmm. And so that led us to the point where we just said, all right, well, how do we stop this? And we didn't have the tools, we didn't know what to do, but we prayed and just got the sense that we were supposed to say, this is it. This is enough. And you guys are supposed to live on this amount, and whatever else God gives you, it goes to the kingdom or whatever. And that's brought such freedom just to draw the line and say, we're never going to be wealthier than we are.
So, and again, we now know several friends have done this. You guys prayed through it. God led you. But people talk about capping their income. Right? Where is contentment? Both providing, of course, for your family and the needs that you have and the things that you feel led to do. So there's provision, which is healthy and right. And there's a capping of it so that we're not living anxiously. Like the joke is, I had a friend years ago that was worth several $1 million, and he wanted to meet with me, and he was really having a bit of an emotional breakdown because the market had crashed and he had lost several million of his several million. He still had several million left. And so I paid for his dinner with my last $25 added my name. But he was more anxious because, again, it was his worldview was, I need this much, and that is no longer there, but he couldn't see what he did have. Right? Versus the guy who, at that time had a few meager resources, felt freer to be able to buy a dinner than a guy. It really gets down to the heart, doesn't it? The complexity inside of us.
Yeah, and they say that we value losses by a factor of 3. So you're 3 times sadder losing something than you are the moment that you gain
the joy of it. Right. Yeah.
And so, so the easiest way to be happy is to limit yourself so that you never have it in the first place, because then you never lose it.
Wow. That's a good thought. All right, J.O., what are you thinking over there related to money and you and Christy and kind of how you guys viewed it?
Well, just talking about, I hear your story. I know you, but I didn't know that part of your story. And so I love that. I came from the other side of it, of, grew up at a country club, and I'm not throwing shade on the country club, but it did color my worldview.
Right.
And I also, because I'm a human being, I looked around and I saw a lot of discontent, which what y'all are talking about. Yeah. So you were coming this way. Yeah. This was not led by the Spirit. This was born of the flesh.
You were given an abundance.
Right. But then I was like, that must be bad. Because then when I started following Jesus and I was getting discipled, I started reading the text that y'all are talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm going, like this is new. I must be doing something bad, and coupling it with therefore money must be bad, and so I need to be afraid of it and run away from it. And that was the flesh.
Yeah.
So I've had to have Jesus train. But isn't it interesting? It's like whether you're coming from this side or this side, what you said at the beginning, that issue of the heart is, I mean, it's present on both sides of it.
Yeah. So here's the deal, and of course, I love how money leads us to deeper truths that we need to be talking about. Is you don't get to righteousness by fear. Ultimately, and by righteousness, the right place, right standing with God. Fear, it can start a process, but it can't sustain a process. So perfect love casts out fear. So the love of God, the fear of the Lord may cause me to say, I need God, but the love of God eventually drives out the fear that is unhealthy in me related to God or other things. So what I would say about money is that it is powerful. It is to be respected because it has power on it, but it is not ultimately to be feared a little or a lot. I love the Proverbs, where it says, let me not have so much that I forget you, or too little that I rob from you. Give me my portion, which is yours. So all of us are just saying, Lord, what is enough at this season of my life? What is my portion? And it'll be enough. And then it becomes about contentment, not fear of having too little or too much. And I what I've said is a person in poverty can be in bondage just as much as a wealthy materialist. Totally. It's just different sides of the coin, no pun intended. Right. But they both are drivers of fear, anxiety, or control that are unholy. So what I always say is create a system financially where you have to think about money less, not money more. Right? So we always tried to create simple systems in our lives where we weren't having all these managing pieces going on so that money wasn't controlling our thoughts, whether we had a little or whether we had a lot. So let's just stay on this track here. Let's go through my little outline. Live simply, work diligently, give generously. So let's start with live simply. And again, how I define that is be content, live within your means, don't leverage yourself out. So we're in Matthew 6, 25 through 33, or really all the way through 34, Jesus said, don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you drink, what you're going to wear, do not clothe the birds of the field. And then he says, seek first my kingdom, or his kingdom and his righteousness. All these things will be added to you. Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow has enough care of its own. We often leave verse 34 out, right? Many times we are leveraging ourselves or pushing ourselves for our fear of not getting enough, not getting ours, or not having what we want for tomorrow, or whatever the driver of that is. So for Laura and I, we decided early on, whatever we have is what we have. So though we now have adjusted our practice, we started with no credit card and cash only to deal with that in us. So many times you have to do something radical to get back to center. That's right. You know what I'm saying? If you don't, if you're stuck, you can't just kind of inch your way out of stuck. That's right. You got to do something radical. So for us, we started our marriage, no credit card. We said we will have one checkbook, not two, and whatever we have is what we have. So when it's gone, it's gone. Or back in the day, we had little envelope systems, so much for food, so much for giving, so much for clothing, whatever. And not all those envelopes had money in them because we didn't have that much money. Yes. But we put ourselves in a system of discipline for many, many, many years that became habit. So, you have to create a habit different than you grew up or different than you would prefer in order to change something. So for us then, even we decided, and not that everybody has to do this, this is a description, not a prescription, but we even said, okay, how far does that go for us? And for us, it was mortgage on a house. We just said everything we do, we want to do debt-free. Not because I believe that's the 11th commandment, but because it was a calling for us to be able to live simply and live within our means. So by the grace of God, we've been able to carry that through 35 years of marriage. But it was one of the best decisions we made to keep our hearts content and to not be comparing and anxious for somebody else's stuff. All right, live simply. Give me your take on that.
Yeah, when Proverbs talks about, hey, make sure that you know the condition of your flocks and herds.
Yeah.
Right, so know what's going on.
Know what you got.
So as part of living simply, we want to know what's coming in.
Right.
set some kind of a budget for ourselves. It doesn't be down to the dollar, but you track it. It takes some diligence to track your flocks and herds. This is what God's given you. It's His stuff.
Yep.
We want to know. We want to know where it is.
Yeah.
And then we set limits that fit within that.
Yeah.
And so I agree. Not everyone has to have the same view exactly on debt, and there can be places here and there where people, godly people, can disagree. But no one wants to be in extreme credit card debt. Yeah. No one wants to be in massive crushing amounts of debt, and the borrower is slave to the lender. We don't want to be in slavery. Yeah. And so to the extent that we can get ourselves free from debt and live simply in that way, that's awesome.
Yep. J.O., any comments?
Well, I think on Live Simply, the amount of space that's stuff, just the amount of management that has mentally, much less than the physical management of, okay, I'm thinking through, did I do this? Did I not do this? What did I? And so many things to where I didn't have limited time, money, energy for seeking first the kingdom because I'm so preoccupied with. Yeah. So I like that just from I've got to help myself out by simplifying.
That's right. I mean, even in investing or whatever,
Yeah, exactly.
People that are getting into crypto and stuff, I guarantee they're watching it really closely, right? So now your heart is tied up in what is it up, is it down? And that leaves less space, right, for prayer, less space for thinking about the needs of your family. And so where your treasure is, your heart gets tied up in these things that we've invested in. And so I'm with you. How do we create as much mental space for God, for others as we can, and spend less time thinking about the things that get us all spun up that way?
Wow. All these are 3-day seminars. So let me just have a few wrap thoughts, because we're going to pick up with our next podcast on working diligently and giving generously, which again is impossible to do in 20 minutes. But I think what I want to encourage everybody to do is, if you're listening today, I would encourage you to read Matthew 6, like the whole thing. Talk about a rich chapter. I mean, you could actually live your whole life and just do Matthew 6 and you'd change the world. Lord's Prayer, dealing with money and heart issues, dealing with anxiety, living contently, seeking the kingdom, all written by Jesus, right?
Don't give to be seen by people.
Yeah, there's just Matthew 6 can carry you. So if you're a young person or new to this conversation or wondering, I'm not sure I believe about all that, go to the Bible first and let it wash over your heart and mind a little bit. Then re-listen to this and things like this. But maybe on this living simply thing, I think it really comes down to what really makes the heart of man content, right? So I cut my teeth on Richard Foster's Celebration of Discipline, which had a lot of simplicity throughout it. There was a guy named Swinson that wrote a book called Margins. That was a real helpful resource. Or we just, a new book out, 24/6 by a guy named Matthew Sleeth. It's a good thing on Sabbath. It's all related to contentment. So if you go to the money too fast, you miss the whole point. Any other resources or recommendations you guys have on living simply?
Yeah, when there's financial chaos, right?
Yeah.
God's a God of order, not a God of chaos.
Right.
And so if our finances are in chaos, we've got some great things through Antioch with the Realign, or Financial Peace University, things like that. So yes, read the books and then enter into a process. Like you and Laura set some parameters and went through a process where you're paying attention to your finances to get form in place. And then from that place, you start to operate with more freedom. Yeah. So let's get those forms in place and go through the process. Yes. Use those kinds of resources.
I like the idea. I was given Swinson's Margin 25 years ago, but I also, it was accompanied with Discipleship. Yeah. So having someone, and now Christy and I, with joy, do that with other people. Let's, like you said, let's know the condition of the flock. Let's get everything down on a spreadsheet so that we can then say, okay, Lord, how are you? Now we're reading Matthew 6 with the spreadsheet. Are you telling me to cut some things out? Yeah. But you're not doing it by yourself because you've got someone in there with you.
Absolutely. There you go. And maybe I'll end with that thought. I said, if somebody can't know everything that I have, then that's where the enemy is probably working over with what I have. I need to come into the light with whatever I have, whether it's a little or a lot, in appropriate, with healthy people that can help me manage where I am in life, because nobody's ultimately going to get to God just get to God's way independently without community.
That's right. Healthy people who are roughly similarly situated.
Yes, exactly.
Otherwise, they think, oh, if you have a lot, they think, oh, that's too much.
Same.
People in about the same category that
Yeah.
can look at it with that level of compassion and accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
So you got about 53 suggestions of great stuff to do and some heart stuff more than anything. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. That's what Jesus is saying. I've got your provision already lined out for you. Just seek me in every area of life, and specifically in this area of finances, so that our hearts are free to love him more. All right. Hang with us next week. Pick back up on working diligently and giving generously.